So I can push my little stratagems and they come up.
That was a perfect segue. Take it away, AJ.
Oh shoot.
Now I'm
Oh,
echoing.
you know me. My phone volume's always up. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Esports and Coffee, your regular entertainment on your Wednesday evening. Hello. You may notice that the lineup looks a little different. Our look looks a little different. Thanks, Jackie, for the hard work there. Um, but welcome. We're halfway through March, more than halfway through March, which is pretty wild. But tonight, our topic for tonight, we're going to talk about esports contracts. We've seen a lot of kind of discourse about this on various social medias, so we thought it would be a great topic to kind of bring forward today. And we figured we would also bring a special guest with us to really kind of get into the nitty gritty of it, to talk about the expertise. So we have Tom Screech with us here today. Hello, Tom.
Hello. I know a thing or two about contracts, so I'm very happy to be here.
We're so excited for you to be here. And just a reminder that if you're not in a Discord, you should be. Meet and gather, foster community, celebrate each other, get each other through struggles. We have a lot of weekly, daily things that we all like to contribute to. Have fun. I'll post there's the Discord, the fun Discord link. Yeah, and then I also wanted to give a quick shout out to our website. We are in the process of updating that. As soon as Esport Trends is live, we're gonna have that on our website, and then we have Cora on there, as well as our gear, and Spectrum Industries also has a new report out as well. So we're always looking for new reports and articles to add to our website. If you want to be added, please just join our Discord and DM us. Okay, so again, Tom, thank you for coming. Why don't you give us a little introduction, who you are, how you got into the position you are, and what you did before?
Yeah, so first of all, absolutely, thank you so much for inviting me on. I love the work that you guys do, and to be here and foster that conversation within the community is absolutely awesome. So I'm super happy to be here. But yeah, my name's Tom Screech, and if anyone's thinking, wow, just like Saved by the Bell, yep, spelled just like Saved by the Bell. It's funny, that line doesn't really do that well in the UK because most people go, Saved by the Bell? Not really sure what it is. I think it was on Nickelodeon at some point when I was growing up. But I've been in and around the esports industry ever since I was a little kid. I was begging my parents to take me to Insomniac Games, as it was called, up in London and Birmingham, and force them to try and take me to IEM Katowice. Never managed to make it that far. I made it to Cologne once, which was great, but never made it to Katowice, which is always like the number one place for me to go. So that's always a goal of mine. But I've been in esports for a while. In terms of the kind of the business side of esports, I'd say I've been here for about probably 5 years, working with first Philly esports way back when. We were trying to do some collegiate stuff, and then I got picked up by CSL, moved into Playfly esports, and then in the nice corporate world for a bit, and suddenly I thought, hey, I can't do an 8 a.m. sales meeting on a Monday anymore. I need to find something a little bit nicer. And luckily I was teaching part-time at Harrisburg at the time, and a full-time opportunity came up. So I was really, really excited to jump into the teaching side of things, and it's been amazing. I've really taken kind of the big and bolshy business school stuff and boiled it down into something that's really digestible in our community, and actually comparing it to stuff in our community, which is really fun. You know, looking at like, oh, how did this team come around, and let's actually look at the issues that caused TSM to collapse from, you know, top down, and study why those things happened. So that's been a really interesting side of esports to learn. And then the other side of things is I absolutely adore collegiate esports. I always used to joke to people that I never understood like the passion of college sports in the US. I'd be like, I don't know why people love, you know, like Penn State or someone. Now I have like diehard passion for Drexel. Never been there. I've never been to the campus, but I love that program, man. I will go to bat for them. And there's a bunch of other programs that I've like just absolutely gained an affinity for, and it's been beautiful. This community is absolutely incredible. So I'm lucky to work with Collegiate Fighting Game Conference as well, and the Collegiate Esports News folks there. Absolutely incredible. So I'm in a couple projects, just a couple.
I really love that for you, though. And for everyone else that is creating the orgs that are out there, you know, CFG and then Collegiate Esport News, like, I feel like it's needed. And I feel like we need leaders in the industry to and we need new people.
Mhm.
And that's what I love about everyone coming to collaborate and to create the spaces that we're all like, hey, let's do this, and people are doing it. So that's what I love about it.
Yeah, it's absolutely awesome. I love seeing the creativity people come out with every week.
Okay, so the big thing while you're here, and AG and I, as much as we've had jobs, where we might not know as much about contracts. So that's why we have brought you on. Let's talk about contracts. And we're going to start with what type of contracts are out there for esports individuals, people in general.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's funny. Contracts, when I first started in the industry, I thought contracts were these like big 70-page documents that I would have to sit down with like 3 lawyers to read and understand properly. And then you get into the space and you start working with people and you realize a contract is really anything. As long as you can get 2 signatures on it, people will normally take that. So, I mean, I've signed a contract on purely just a PowerPoint slide before. So that's always the first thing I try to let people know is really a contract is just any form that you manage to get terms down on and is signable. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a businessman. So I was the guy that was always pissing off the lawyer students and like trying to get them to lower terms and things like that. So this isn't all legal advice, but the processing of contracts is really simple. So there's really one type: deliverables on a term sheet, what you get back, and then a place to sign at the bottom. I've done contracts that are as simple as just 2 paragraphs on an A4 document, where it's we will give you X, we will get back Y, and the 2 signatures. Or you can go into pages and pages of litigation and little tiny details where you go into like when you can break the contract, right? That's sometimes what people will include, like, hey, we can't break the contract unless there's a 30-day notice each side. The contracts will get bigger now. Whenever I work on a contract, I make sure that they've got a late payment fee in there. So like, you got to pay your bills on time, and if you don't, I'm going to be adding on that little percentage every missed pay date that you go through. That's something you could put on a contract. You can go as far as to put down like specific brand guidelines, right? Like every time you tweet about us, you have to call us this specific name. You have to refer to us in this specific way. I was just speaking to someone today where I can't say the names, but for an event, we can't talk about a certain sponsor on X, well, Twitter, because they just don't use the platform. They don't have an audience there. They don't see any point in us sharing the content there. So they're just going, what? We're just going to avoid that content. They're esports adjacent.
They're not on Twitter. They don't want to be on Twitter. Did they realize that?
Yeah.
I mean,
sometimes I go, all right, so you're cool. It's your money you're spending. But like, Twitter's a big platform. So yeah, really, the contracts can be anything. As long as you have your terms down and you have the terms down for the deal and sign it, that's pretty much a contract.
I think even getting down, like you were saying about payments too, not like, so some people don't know terms for that. So N30 means that they would pay within 30 days. And if they don't, then you can sue them or whatever your contract says. And sometimes people do N15 with a percentage. So N15, 10% means you could take 10% off your bill.
Yeah. So the most typical ones you see in esports are N60s, so 60 days after. It's very hard, at least in the kind of sponsorship spending side of things, to get brands to pay up a lump sum ahead of time, which can be frustrating, right? Because a lot of esports things need cash up front. We're spending money on marketing, we're spending money on renting stuff. So putting down a line in there, I always like to try and do like at least 50% of the deal. And that's something that you have to, when you're having the conversation with the client and you're working out the ins and outs of the contract, if you guys need $2,000 on signing, that's something that you can just put down in the contract and really put your foot down on. And I know it may suck. You may lose a contract by someone saying, hey, we simply can't pay at the front. But when you're kind of front loading the work, you need to get cash up front. And that's also how you avoid some of the situations where, we have people that will come in, do all the work, and then they go way beyond their like N60 days. And then the client was trying to pay owes 3 other people, and then those people don't get paid. And then it's a knock on from, the one company that just should have said, hey, we don't have $10,000 to pony up right now. Give us 6 months and we might do.
So one of my Oh,
No,
you wanna
no,
go?
you go. You go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
you
don't-
go.
So with esports contracts, what? Just because like I've got zero knowledge, right?
Mhm.
What roles do you typically see getting contracts? Do they usually fall more under kind of like photographers and market? Like what roles do typically get contracts? I would say just like bare bones level.
Yeah. So to take you like a step further back, when you look at signing contracts, you need to look at what's in it. So if there's cash in it, 9 times out of 10, you're gonna have to go through someone in finance. And when you go into business prospecting itself, you call those guys the decision makers. You got decision makers. I'm sure you probably heard the term gatekeepers before, right? People that don't let you through into that space. So the decision makers are always going to be the people that have sign off on a contract. And that's always one huge caveat is if at the end of the day, the contract has to get signed off by, someone 3 steps ahead of you, your boss's boss's boss. How does that process work? How do you actually get the contract to that person? Do you have to go through the whole system, or can you just get pre-approval and sign it yourself? I have signed contracts myself as a junior. When sometimes the boss is busy, you know that you've already got approval from them, and you can just sign away. Always feels really cool when you get to put your name down and you get to see like your name next to a big CFO, and you're like junior account executive. But yeah, really the contract, anyone will sign a contract. So if, like you said, photographers, if you are doing a deal that includes photography, then yeah, the contract absolutely should go to the photographer, and the photographer should get a chance to see what they're signing over. 9 times out of 10, you'll only need 2 signs, which is the highest person up on their team that has the say, and the highest person up on the other team that has a say. So I was always going like CEO to CEO, or whoever's logged into the CEO's Adobe Sign account and is available at the time. I'm kidding, I never did that. Or whoever's around. Normally, there's someone that will go through the contracts. Like you'll have a person on the team that will have final sign off on most things. But yeah, I mean, I always would use the contract as essentially I would use the contract as the mark off for the deliverables. So everything that we were promising to give goes in the contract. I have the contract printed out. It goes on my board, and then whenever we're doing something, I just tick it off. Say we have 15 tweets to do, I put 15 marks next to the thing, and then we know that's done. That also is really important because then when you come to the end of the contract, you have the fun stuff of renewals, which is, how do we, instead of pitching a brand new deal, how do we just get you to carry it on and kick it over for another 18 months, 2 years, rather than, you disappear. We then have to repitch you a whole new thing. It's making sure you're still meeting those deliverables as you go. I hope that answered the question.
I think it's important for students too. Like students, especially if you're a student worker, you're going to sign a contract. You're going to sign a student work agreement, and to make sure you're reading what it is and it's not just I'm doing everything for the director, or I can only work like so many times. So in my undergrad, I heard so many grads who were like, I work 40 hours a week, but I only get paid 20. And when I started hiring undergrad students, I wanted to make sure I'm like, if you're going over 20 hours, you have to tell me so that I can offload something or restructure it. Because I never wanted someone to feel like they were doing more, not getting paid. I never wanted to not pay them for the work that they were doing. And
that's the worst thing in esports, because people, I didn't mean to cut you off, is because I've had to tell my students all the time, like, stop at 15 hours, stop working. Mm-hmm. We cannot legally pay you for any more. Please stop working. You know what I mean? Because esports people would just go all day and all night. I mean, we've all been up at 1 a.m. trying to fix an issue. And yeah, like sometimes that is just out of your working hours. And if you got to stick to the contract, sticking to the contract is healthy. If you've done your 40 and it's gone, then hey, yeah, you are technically violating your contract.
I think,
but they do always have the cap. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine. I think it brings up the work-life balance. Like we want our especially with students, and if you're an intern, especially if you're not getting paid, like you're not going, 60 hours into a project for 1 week and you're not getting paid. I just want to stress, like, make sure, like you had mentioned before, you've signed stuff with only 2 paragraphs. I encourage students and individuals to lengthen that if they need to. Be like, I need definitive terms in this.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you might get screwed over. We'll talk about getting screwed over later.
No, that's exactly. Yeah, no, I mean, like I tell people all the time is there isn't a set stuff that we have to put into a contract, but also there isn't a set stuff we have to leave out of a contract. We can be as minute as possible, right? Down to like the absolute granular details of we won't do this without getting any approval. Or, I mean, I've had people that put in contracts like, yeah, no, you can't post unless we've had at least 48 hours to view the tweet and make sure the content's right. And that causes a big spanner in the works when you have to try and set content calendars way out in advance. So reading through those contracts, especially when you're a student worker, and especially when you're doing brands with bigger entities that maybe send you a preset contract, like 11 pages long. If it's 11 pages long, there's a lot of stuff in it, right? There's going to be a lot of terms. They can probably, I mean, it's how no one ever told me when I moved to the US that there was a thing called at will. I only found that out when I read my first working contract, and I was like,
oh no,
what does a at will mean? And they're like, oh, we can fire you at any time, but you can also quit at any time.
Not every state. Not every state.
Unfortunately, it feels like every state. But I came from a country where we have minimum 4 weeks notice. So that was like a massive change. Yeah, that's always fun. Saying you quit and then having to be there for the next month.
Well, I feel like in the States, it's like the opposite. People are so afraid to put in their 2 weeks. And it doesn't even say it's at will. They don't even say you have to put in 2 weeks. Like some contracts. So my partner's contract for his job, he needed to put in at least a month. At least, so he did. Otherwise, he wouldn't get paid PTO. And some jobs were so worried about putting in our 2 weeks that they'll just fire us right away. So it's almost like, do we have the job to start right away, or do we get in 2 weeks is nothing. Like, come on, who's going to find a replacement in 2 weeks?
Yeah, no, it's insane. It's always funny when you do put your 2 weeks in and you're like, are you going to argue for me a little bit, or are you just going to let me go right now?
Are you going to try and keep me? I didn't feel that
like,
when
I can leave at the end of the week.
So one of the other questions that I had, you mentioned if you complete a contract with somebody, you particularly liked the way that they worked, what they delivered on, and there's a way to like renew the contract. Is it easier to kind of like renew a contract than like drafting up like a whole different one? Like, are those processes, like, are they different? And like, what's the process of like being able to like take that contract worker and like possibly turn that into like a full-time position? Like, what does that whole sort of process look like?
Yeah, so I know you could almost call it an epidemic of 1099 workers in esports is insane, right? So there's two parts of the question. There's contracts from the point of being like contracting a freelancer, and then there's contracts for sponsorships and partnerships and doing brand deals on that sense. So when you are, the issue is there's no set precedent for it. That's what we're all dealing with. There's no, you go to contract school, we build contracts like this is how contracts work.
That was actually my next question. Is going to be how do you learn how to do this? Is there
a lot of trial and error?
An esports degree.
I had a class in school where we looked at like business litigation and contracts, but yeah, there's not like we didn't sit down and go through all the terms. That's such a great contract class. Would be great. But like, so for the sorry, that's just tickled me. Contract school would be funny. Today we're going to be doing food contracts.
I think that's what lawyers are called. A little bit.
I think that is
I think that's what most lawyers are called.
Like, did, right?
Yeah. There's some lawyers who deal with contracts. I'm pretty sure that's what some lawyers.
There are contract lawyers.
Chat can tell us or not.
Yeah, chat. Can we get a chat on that? Is there a lawyer on
in
board?
the house?
So
Get one
the
on
renewal
board.
process is a really interesting fact, because when you look at traditional sports and you look at contracts in normal partnerships, they're always like crazy long terms, right? You hear like, oh, the Pepsi arena is going to be there for the next 15 years. And we're like, great, that's amazing. What that contract really is if it is a 15-year contract, that's great, but it's probably like a 5-year renewing every 5 years. So it's like a 5-year initial term. Then they'll meet at the end of the first 5 years, can see if they want to continue. If they don't, they may have a pull-out clause where they can say, hey, we're just going to take the money that we've lost already. You will open up, a new naming rights situation, and then we'll just go from there. So that's how those longer one works. From when you have a contract that's expiring. So like when I was at Next Star League, if a partner was going to expire 6 to 3 months, that is when you'd start that conversation of like, hey, we've been having a really great. It's like trying to stop someone from leaving you is like the worst way to put it. But it's like, you're like, hey, remember all these great times we shared? Wasn't this post amazing? We really love that video. Don't you remember how good that video was? You should come back for the next year. And that's really the conversation that it goes, right? Is you understanding what budget they've got, what they liked, what they didn't like, and what they want to do going forward. They may turn around and say, hey, this first contract was just a test moment for us. We just wanted to see how esports was doing. And, they're not interested in you can't engage them in a renewal, but you still have that contract as like hey, we still worked with this client. It was still an amazing time. When you look at bringing people on full time, it's tough. It's tough because I have been in the position, as I'm sure we all have, where you've got people on 1099s and you're begging the higher ups to bring them on full time. But the truth is it's expensive to bring them on full time. That's not me trying to defend the higher ups. I'm very anti the man, sorry. But yeah, like we should be able to bring people on just because we should be able to bring people on and not be afraid of having to pay them healthcare and having to pay them retirement, because that's the real reason. The 1099 contracts offer an ability to cut your losses and get rid of the contractor immediately. The second you bring them on as a member of staff, they're a family, for want of a better phrase. So they have all those extra bits on the side
benefits.
That you then have to, the benefits, because it does cost the company. It's I know, quite often they look at corporate greed and they look at the amount they make as the only red line they care about, but it does cost to have an employee, and it costs to lose an employee as well. And you also have to look at, when you have an employee, what training do we put in? If we're trying to keep them 3 years, do we send them on a training session at a year and a half? But with a 1099, they're just someone that you call up every Wednesday to do some work for you. So I'm not a fan of it. I'd prefer if everyone was looked after nicely, certainly.
I just started playing Supermarket Store, and I hit level 20 so I could hire my second employee because I didn't want to do it. And it's like $80 a day. And I'm like, I have to make sure I have $160 a day.
And you haven't even thought about when that employee gets sick. Do you have someone to cover?
I mean, they're bots. I don't think they ever get sick unless, like, I don't know. There's some stuff with Apex right now, so maybe I'll get. I don't know what's going on hilarious. With that, but I don't know. That's a whole different dump. Okay, let's keep going on. I'm gonna stream that one of these days. I promise. AJ, it's a cozy game. You'd like it.
I love it. Okay, so kind of what would you... Our next kind of section is when we're looking at ways to protect yourself in a contract. I know we touched on this kind of lightly already, but if I am somebody who's looking to sign a contract for X work, what are some fail-safes that you might suggest if a contract doesn't have X, Y, or Z in it? It's kind of questionable. What are some things to look out for that are scary, or what are some ways that you might be able to negotiate some protections for yourself?
Yeah, so that's an absolutely great question. The thing I always look for is break terms. So what the client and also you have in terms of protection for breaking the contract. Sometimes if you have a really like impactful deal, say you have like a naming rights partner, right? They might have to give you like a whole year notice to break the contract. We see in esports the issue of want of a better phrase, the kind of like the big brother attitude of like, I don't give a shit. You are the tiny person that is doing work. I am the big corporation. So you have no say up to me. I'll just ignore everything that you say down. I think a lot of people forget that the esports community, especially collegiate esports community, talks a lot. So obviously, so we know when someone doesn't pay. In fact, I'm pretty sure I've seen someone's account that has a running list of all the companies that are late on payments. At least I know there's very few that have paid on time. Back to the point. Yes. So looking for term breaks is always really important. Also looking at any of the limitations they place on you. So any type of creative direction, any type of approval process. How does that approval process work? Who do you have to check to get that stuff approved? And similarly, what rights are you giving up yourself? So great example, esports and coffee. If we were to go and do a brand deal right away, how much, is that brand that we're working with going to use our brand? Where are they going to publish things? What benefits do we get other than just cash? There might be situations where they could offer us mentorship. They could offer us any type of brand deal, building a product for us. It might not just be cash straight up. And when it's not just cash straight up, how does that money make its way back to you? So if you are building a product in partnership with this company, right, what are the actual limitations of that product? Who actually owns the product? Where does that product be housed? What percentage do you guys get back? I see a lot of, and I don't know the inner workings of the deals, but I always see a lot of people doing collegiate esports merch, and they'll host it on one of any of the percentage of shops that they have available. My number one thing is always like, well, what percentage kickback do you get? Like, how much money are you actually making from that? Do you see any percentage? Or are you just purely hosting them on a platform and you don't make money off that? Because if you don't make money off that, then it's so easy to set up your own Shopify and create your own relation with a shirt printer that you could do it in a week, and then you're not losing any of the percentage at that point. You get to make all the
Shopify is
profit.
such a good idea for clubs or starters who don't have the bandwidth to I know, like, I'm a really big fan of Fat Cap just because I helped broker that deal before I left, and the product they have made for my previous job was so good. But Shopify, that's what we use for our brand. So yeah. I didn't even think about other like colleges just like getting that out, and because it's all drop shipped. You don't have to get storage for it.
Yeah, no, it's all print on demand stuff. Funny enough, right before COVID, I was looking into the whole drop shipping stuff, and I had come up with this great idea to like ship stuff in from China, and then of course COVID happened, and I was like, wow, that was the worst timing possible. Suddenly my 2-week shipping item turned into like 3 months. But yeah, I looked into the whole like pod printing on demand, and there's so many companies that will upload a design and you can just print it to thousands of different things. I often say, total off point of this, but I often say to people that when you look at the commercialization of esports and how esports programs make money, I always like to look at the NFL, right? If you grew up in Detroit, you had like a Detroit Lions pencil. You would have a Detroit Lions pencil case, a backpack, all of these random items that make like 50 cents on the dollar for the company. That's really where a lot of the money is coming in, right? If you sell 1 million pencils at $1, that's better than selling one thing at $500,000. It just makes sense, right? It just makes sense when collegiate esports, I think, and esports as a general, manages to have the fan base that will buy their kids, a TSM lunchbox and TSM pens and Cloud9 backpacks. That is when the real money will be started being made, and that's where there is opportunity. Like we talk about the contracts, there's opportunity to put yourself forward and say, hey, I want to start making my products on everything, and I want to start getting a kickback from it, and I actually want to start building a commercial pipeline with this team that I think would do well. And it comes down from negotiating a good contract. It comes to go on.
Sorry, you just brought up the word negotiation. I think that's something that it's also, we don't have a class for negotiation, or we don't have a degree to become a negotiator. It's almost not something that there are a lot of like panelists talking about how to negotiate well, or even people just talking about how to negotiate your own contract, your own work contract, your full-time. Here is what my job offered me. I want to ask for a higher pay. So many people within, I think the States, I don't even know if the world, but currently within the States are just like, this is what they offered me and this is what I'm going to stick. I'm not even going to ask for more or for different terms because I'm so afraid that they're going to pull that offer. And I feel like I always tell people that they need to negotiate a higher salary. Why not? Look at the medium for your range. Go on Glassdoor. It's free. It costs nothing to put in your Google account, and you can look at reviews. You can look at the medium salary. You can look at the benefits. But then you can also negotiate benefits. People don't realize that some positions, when you get benefits, they're like, this doesn't start for 90 days. And you're like, wait, I need insurance now. Can we negotiate starting within 30 days if I do a good job, within 10 days if I do a good job? And I feel like if people need a prep talk to negotiating, we should start talking about that. You know, ask a mentor, ask a friend. If you get a job offer, you like talk it through on what it is and how you can almost better it. And it doesn't even need to be better, but it could be. You don't know. And I think that's where we're just so afraid, because so many of us are just so young. We don't know how to negotiate. We take the first offer and that's what we're going to be dealt with. Like, we don't want to have them go on to the next person. And so if anyone needs a personal prepper, I'll definitely hype you up.
You did a great job. As I say, I'm now prepared to negotiate more in my next review. Negotiating, it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing because a lot of people don't like to feel like they're gonna just throw the chance away right away. You know, like you feel so scared to push back on the first amount that you get told, and you think that's it. If I tell them $100 more, then I'm not going to get it. I like to avoid the whole negotiating question, but I often like to put the budget question back on the person I work with. So like, how much do you have allocated for this project? That's always a great question.
It's a perfect example. Yeah.
It's a great question because you may go into a meeting. In fact, we did this with X brand, went into a meeting and I was told that we think they've got like a $3,000 budget to do this, and started off the meeting. And I was like, just checking, what is your actual budget for this? And the person was like, oh, actually like around $8,000-9,000. So that's great news, right? You suddenly get given a massive payday. And even when you get told that final amount, the negotiating space is really there for you to take control of, especially like you said on personal contracts. So, you know, like you said, benefits is a massive thing. I always try to negotiate. We were talking about it beforehand a little bit about notice periods, but yeah, like I always try to negotiate like a longer notice period. Hey, if you guys want to get rid of me, what about 2 months? The same way goes, if I'm planning to leave, I have to give you 2 months notice, because then when it comes down to chomp time and they do want to get rid of you, suddenly they have to pay you 2 months wages to do that, or you just sit on your ass and don't do anything. Those are some really, really interesting ways you can lock yourself in securely to a place as well. Negotiating wage is tough, right? You are essentially told in this really callous way that we think you are worth this much. You are exactly this value to the company. And you have to kind of go, no, I think I'm a little bit more. It always helps when you have stuff to kind of back it up. You know, like, hey, I've been doing all this work. I've done X, Y, and Z before I came here. I've been trying to make waves. I think with this much more, you know, $10,000 more, I can securely feel like I can work safer to do a better job at your company. I always really like to use the line as I've been getting older, like, hey, I need to start saving for a house. Put the guilt on them. Or like,
sorry.
No, it's
I would love to buy a house. Yes.
Yeah, no, like, hey, I'm still
renting.
renting. I'm still renting, so yes. But yeah, like, hey, I'd like to buy a house. Or when it comes to review, I always just tell them like, man, my car's been acting up. You know, like things like that. Talk about
You want me to get to work?
Yeah, literally start putting these things in, because you'll realize that a job offer isn't them saying, okay, this is what it is. If you negotiate, we're going to get rid of you. It's a job offer. They want you. They do actually want you to work there. And 9 times out of 10, your negotiation goes back to someone at HR, right? The person you're speaking to has zero opinion on the negotiation. They also probably have little to no decision. It'll go up and it'll say, hey, so-and-so's requested $3,000 more and this benefit, and they'll go, okay, that's fine, phone down. That's really the conversation that they have.
It is.
And that's all it ever is hey, they've asked for a couple grand more, and the person goes, okay, and they do it. Or they say no, and then you get told no, but maybe you can say, okay, if it's not a pay rise, then how about we increase holiday by a week? How about we do this just so I can feel more secure in the job? And you really have to sell it from that angle. You're not kind of doing it in a way of like, what will it take to get me here? It's really kind of like I want to work here and I want to feel secure here, and this will make me feel secure. That's the way it's worked for me.
For my current position, when I was negotiating my contract, I asked for more than what their range was, and they came, and I listed my reasons. I went for it, and they came back that the reasons why they couldn't was within the state. They were legally only allowed to do it under this ladder system with the amount, but because of what I had, they were able to offer me the top amount. So I was like, that's only like $4,000 of what I had wanted. So I made it to the top amount, and it's my job now. And I also want to point out, if people, when you get your contracts, if they're asking you to do more than what your contract states, to start getting those receipts. If it's in a DM or if it's in an email, save those. And a lot of emails, you need to realize that, like, my work email deletes after 90 days, like my emails. So unless I archive it, so make sure you're saving those, or you're
I have a whole
keeping
folder
those.
of screenshots.
Yep. Make sure you're
just like good reports.
Yeah, saving those and documenting when you do things outside or you're asked extra. Hey, can you stay an extra day? Hey, can you just work on this one extra thing? Extras become more, and eventually you can put that on why you should get paid more. And eventually, if you're asked for a raise and they don't give it to you, you have two options. You can say, okay, I'm going to look for somewhere else, or I'm going to continue doing things for free.
Yeah. And you mentioned a good point, like noting things down, because the very first thing when you ever ask for a raise is people go, okay, well, tell me why. And then, you don't have to go and fish for it. You have the list right there to go off right away.
I think we're ready to get into a little bit. I don't know if this is spicy at all. Maybe we'll make it.
Maybe.
So the reason we wanted to talk about contracts was because in the past year on X, Twitter, I call it Twitter, I'm old, there had been some discourse as to certain individuals not being paid. Was it appropriate for them to put it on Twitter? Was it not? Is it healthy? Is it damaging for our space? Is taking to Twitter the last straw for them? What steps can be taken before we put it out for all the public? And I want to say I wholeheartedly agree. Putting out the public is a good course, but at what point?
Yeah, that's a great question. And also, Danielle mentioned something really great in the chat, which is it's tough for women to negotiate. I fully know I sit in this position as like a big white dude. And it's like, yeah, of course, when I go into a business room, like I'm going to have the percentage that leans towards me, because that's just the way the good old patriarchy works, unfortunately. And yeah, it's tough. It's tough. It's a difficult situation to be in. But the social media stuff is really interesting, because whenever I see a post, my first question is, okay, well, what's the behind the scenes here? What's the actual lines of communication that have been followed? It sucks, but have they sent 3 emails that have gone unanswered yet, or did they just send 1 and then immediately think they've not replied? I'm going to hit fire and send the tweet right away. I don't know of any company that has had a good reason for delaying payment. I feel like it used to annoy me all the time when we were waiting for client payments, especially when your commission is tied to it, and you're sat there and you're like, I've just seen you get like $2 billion in funding. Why are you not paying your invoice? So you're like, you were just on the news yesterday. It's like, it's things like, I know you've seen my email. Why aren't you replying? But yeah, I mean, going public, I'm always going to support people going public and taking a stand. The caveat is the way it's done, right? If you go to Twitter and immediately just write a complete flame fest that is full of bad words and the grammar is terrible, and as you're reading it, you're kind of going, this person isn't understanding the process here. It does make us look massively immature, because unfortunately, and this isn't a criticism, but we, especially in the collegiate esports space, deal with a lot of people that this is their first job out of college, right? They were the club director. They noticed esports was getting big, and then the school noticed esports was getting big, and then they just hired them right out of college. Or they're a caster that has been freelancing this whole time, and they're new into the space, and they don't understand the necessary protocols to go through, or the channels to go through. Now, if they've gone through those channels and they've been ignored, absolutely raise hell. I'm all for that. I will happily retweet something if I've read through it and I'm like, okay, yeah, no, they've been stiff. This sucks. But sometimes, yeah, there may be something in your contract where, hey, you can actually increase the payment, and instead of just writing a twit longer for the 10 grand you originally owed, maybe there was 15 grand of late payment fees you actually missed. If you would check through the contract, then maybe there's a better channel to be going through. I don't know personally. I know that some companies have insurance for unpaid contracts. Like they'll go to their insurance company and say, hey, this person hasn't paid the bad debtor. I can claim that money back. So that's also another side of like the bigger contracts. But yeah, going to Twitter first right away it's a tough call. I mean, if you're not being listened to, it's a great way to get people to listen to you. But it has to be done right. Has to be done right.
I feel like students and others, like you said, younger, just want to be heard. And since we live in such a social media era right now, so I just watched on HBO, because I have a lot of time on my hands right now, the Quiet in the Space, or something. It was about the Nickelodeon kids. And
yeah, I've been seeing a lot of that.
It's horrific what some of the things that happen, but it goes into details about how some of these workers on set that they weren't able to get paid, and they didn't have contracts. They didn't have anything. It was just he said, she said type of thing. And they even bring up Twitter. They're like, this wasn't that big of a scandal back then because Twitter wasn't available. And right now we live in such a social media world that it's like the first thing people want to do is to go out and write on social media. Your emotions are so high. Everyone, like, I know I've talked to AJ. AJ's talked to me about certain things that we just want to go out in Twitter or other social media platforms and just be like, we want to do this. But, we're trying really hard to not do that, and trying to change the narrative of, if you're going to do it positively and not in a negative light. And even though there are horrific people, and sometimes you just have to be negative. Sometimes you have to be negative. But
yeah, I fell into that trap last week. I tweeted about the voice board, and I was like, wow, how diverse, because I just saw a picture of like 8 white dudes. And then I sat down and did the research, and I was like, oh, okay, this was literally all the options they had to choose from.
I loved that tweet. That was
I know. I thought it was a good one, but in the moment, it wasn't the most mature way to do it. And that's what I was learning, is like, okay, just because your take is correct or looks correct, it's like, is it necessary in the moment? Mm-hmm. Is it necessary for us to make this point? So I changed it a little bit, still made the point, but appreciated the situation they were in. I think that's a way for it to be done as well, as like, if people can show the maturity of, hey, I made a really shitty take, or this is going to be a shit take, but this is why I believe it. At least it's backs up to some degree.
Yeah, and the way to come back and like show correction as well, like there's a ton of people for various different, a contract didn't get paid, a ruling didn't go their way, X, Y, and Z happens, they pop off on the internet, something gets remedied, they come to the realization that they were in the wrong, their take, whatever they had to say was just false, and it came out that it was wrong. You took the liberty to like be like, yeah, this was my bad, like you owned up to it. But there's a lot of people that will just let what they said lie, and not do the damage control that I think is needed, which just kind of like doubles down on like the damagingness and the messiness.
And brands look at too.
Yeah.
Like if you send a sketchy tweet about something that you're in the right to do, but the way it's done isn't in the right way. I mean, yeah, brands look at that. If you've got partnering brands with your esports team, and you're off tweeting just absolute random shit, it's going to get back to the brand at some point. My tweets get back to the management at HU at some point. So you know what I mean? Like it always gets trickled back. So yeah, it's like I always feel like a parent telling people to go, hey, you gotta be careful on social media. People are always checking it. But yeah, it's like if you are gonna make that take and you are gonna push it the way you want to push it, all guns blazing, then power to you. But yeah, it leaves a footprint for sure, definitely.
I do have a question. Feel free to skirt around this. Do you think the leagues should have replied the way that they did this past fall
The
on
league,
Twitter?
for which one?
It starts with an N.
Oh, yeah. There's ways to handle it. Yeah. Cool. Good question.
You feel free to not answer too. I don't want you to like burn. I feel like I don't want to burn bridges either, but I feel like it needs to be brought up. And
no, I think, yeah, I've been saying for a long time that esports will only survive around community. I think we're dead of the era of like, hey, I'm going to play 3,000 miles away from you, and these are going to be two teams that compete. The only way sports works is with community. So that's the only way esports is going to work is with a local community. So for a community that exists online, as ours does, it needs to be nurtured in the right way. And I've had my gripes with the way that some leagues run their community management when it's second to none. And I feel like, yeah, sometimes decisions are made where, yeah, it had to be made. Could it have been done a different way? Absolutely. But they don't, or whoever don't sometimes, I think, spend the time to do enough community research. I think a lot of brands suffer from that too, is they'll come in and make a change when, you know, they're working in the industry and they know what the industry is doing, but they don't really know the impact they have on the industry. And I mean, that's always what I used to say at NSL, which is like, you know, it's 800 schools, 20,000 students. That's a huge amount of people, whether, you know, you want to appreciate it or not, whether people think it's a tier one collegiate league or not, it's the biggest. And that has to have some gravitas to it. And yeah, I think the community building could be a little bit better. That's what I'll say.
I think, and I want to be transparent. I hate that I'm not being transparent. So we are talking, well, I'm personally talking about NECC and their Twitter posts from this past fall. And I think what leagues need to do is sit on it for a day or two, really think, instead of just posting something. Because what happened from them posting was just more questions and more backlash. With the link of, if you haven't been paid, that was probably the worst thing that they could have posted.
That was so unhinged to just say like, hey, we've completely forgot our dues owed. I mean, and especially to them, because they were doing a lot of work to make an impact in the community, like the, you know, welcoming every school that got accepted in, or doing really good with the socials. I mean, their socials still look really great, but yeah, like that is the situation where the people at the top were just so disconnected from the community at the bottom, where they were like, hey, this is brilliant. We are quids in. We are going to release a link. Everyone's going to reply, and they're all going to just get their money because that's what they want at the end of the day. And they did that, and I think they realized that, hey, this is to be the Joker. It's not about the money. It's about sending a message. It's like, no, you didn't just not pay on time. You have made waves in the space. It has a lot of impact. In the same way I say, like, hey, if your players are tweeting absolute random shit, it's like, no, like if your corporations are tweeting absolute random shit as well, like it has an impact.
Okay.
So I know we're getting a little bit close on time, but I think a good kind of one of the last questions to ask here is, if an individual, if a player, you know, if they make a boo-boo, if they stumble, you know, if there's a contract that goes off the rails, how do you kind of rectify that? How do you kind of move forward from that? What do you think are good what do you think are good like ideas or maybe some advice there to try to kind of pick it back up?
Yeah, I've really learned that honesty has been like the number one driver to moving forward. And honesty in the way that you're not just saying like, hey, you screwed up and we're really pissed off. It's like, hey, okay, we all know that was bad. We all know that was a situation that shouldn't have happened. What we're not going to do is start blaming people and start being like, this was your fault, this was your fault, this was your fault, this is exactly what you've done wrong. I always look at how you can just immediately get things back on track. So yeah, like if you've goofed up, right, and you've sent the wrong, I mean, I've done it. I once sent off one of my first contracts. I told an influencer we were going to get them 100,000 impressions when I meant to send we were going to get them 10,000 impressions. So that's like a big difference, right? That's 90K. So yeah, so suddenly they're looking at the price and they're going, oh, for 10K, is it not for 100K? And that's a clarification where it's like, hey, I'm new. I hit an extra zero. I made a mistake. I'm very honest about it.
You fat fingered it.
Yeah, if you try to start covering these things up, which is what a lot of people that are very new into the space will do because they worry like, oh shit, I did this wrong. Now this is my final chance gone. I'm going to be fired tomorrow. I'm in an at-will state, so I'm gone. So yeah, like that's the immediate worry. But I always go with honesty, and communication's big, right? Like, hey, I made a mistake. I don't know how to fix it exactly, but I came to you guys because I know that we can fix it together. Or if you've got a player that is really just like, like contracts aren't just monetary value. It's also a contract with, say you've got a contract with your players to play on your team and they have to adhere to a certain amount of, social respect online, and they have to maybe change their gamer tags because it's got profanity in it or something. It's got to be like, hey, we just have to stick to these rules. These are the rules we have to stick to. I'm not saying I agree with them. I'm not saying I love them. I'm not saying I'm standing up for them in any way. But until we're in a position that we can fight it in a way that we know we can do it properly, let's just follow along. Let's just figure out a way that we can work with this. Maybe you inherit a really shit contract. I mean, I've been at companies where, yeah, like you get working on a client and it's like, why the hell have I been given this? But until you can find the time to fix it, you have to figure out how to work with it. And that's always been a big lesson for me because you cannot fix things instantly sometimes. Sometimes the broadcast will just go live and you have the wrong logo on there and you have to wait until the first cast to change to switch it because you can't change a graphic out and right in the middle, something like that. You have to have patience with fixing things, definitely.
I think you brought up another good point, and we've talked about this before, accountability. So most of us, when we reach college, we're adults. 18 apparently is adult in America. I don't know if I agree with that. I feel like okay, I turned 37 this year, and I feel like I'm just reaching being adult. Like, I'm almost there, not quite. I still ask for adult sometimes. But when you're 18, you're legally an adult, and you are accountable. So if you're just going to sign a document without reading it, that's your fault. That's the gist of it, too. And so before I encourage anyone to sign anything, I just had a contract put in front of me for some freelance work, and I realized that the amount of pay for it wasn't worth my current rate. And so I deemed myself worth more, and so I had to back out because of it. And that was my personal preference. But if you just go ahead and sign things without reading over all of your contracts, or having a lawyer read over things, or having a parent, another adult read over someone else, anyone. If you're just going to sign things just willy-nilly, then take accountability for it. And when you don't get paid because it was for free, or you aren't getting paid for 600 days because that's their terms, that's your fault for not reading the contract. It's so important to read it and renegotiate it.
Yeah, absolutely. You actually touched on something. I know we have a couple minutes left, and I think Crunk said it in chat, but like setting the value of yourself is also so important. Like when people are saying, oh, how much do you want for this role? It's like, well, okay, you want me to be honest? You're going to pay me 70K because that's what I want. Like, you have to sit down and figure out, I was told at a young age, like, you sit down and figure out what your hourly wage is. When you want to freelance, like, that's what you'll get, and it's like, you have to sit down and have that conversation with yourself and figure out, like, okay, if I'm if I am working at my job, yeah, I know it's ridiculous. It's like if I'm working at my job
It's the exact
and I'm being
same
paid
thing.
$10 an hour,
Dude,
I
get
think
side by
I'm worth
side mirror.
20, right? Yeah, like,
Yeah.
like
Look in the mirror.
That's
Self,
how
how
much it
much
is.
are you worth?
Yeah.
I think
How
it-
much are
I
you?
don't
You know,
know.
I think like how much are the materials going to cost? How much is the time? There's certain equations for everything. You know, you can Google that. You can YouTube it. You can ask people in our Discord. There is someone that will be able to answer it for it. If
Yeah,
it's
but
not,
it's like I always tell people it's like when you purchase a Kit Kat, right? A percentage of that purchase goes to the marketing budget. It may not look like it, but it's like a percentage of it does go for it. We are paying. The reason stuff costs more is because they have to put it in pretty packaging. If there was no pretty packaging, it would be cheaper. And it's like you there's so much that goes into the contract and goes into the product that like how much is my worth? Well, if I'm going to spend 10 hours building this product, it's 10 hours of labor, but then I'm going to spend 2 hours marketing it afterwards. Like that marketing cost isn't free. That marketing cost is still labor time. And then are you building the graphics? How long are you going to spend building the graphics? Do you have to get the graphics reviewed? Building in things like review checks, okay, I'm building you a poster. You can have 2 revisions. Any more revisions, that's going to cost you extra.
Yep.
Yeah, like that was a huge thing for me when I was trying to do graphic design, when I was back at home making websites. I was like, okay, you get 2 changes on the website. After that, I'm just going to have to charge you because you're then going into just more of my hourly work. So yeah, that's fun. That's fun sitting and figuring out how much the marketing budget is on a Kit Kat. I try to get my students to do that. They can never figure it out because I'm sure there's no formula. But it's a great class. Like, okay,
now
what's
I'm
the
gonna
marketing
Google it
spend on
after
a Kit
this,
Kat?
and I'm gonna find it. Google's gonna tell me like it's gonna be the first
You should.
thing.
Yeah, right.
I'll let
it'd
you
be
know.
Straight up.
Big Kit Kat.
No, I'm gonna chat GPT it. That's what I'm gonna do.
ChatGPT will know.
They'll tell me what a contract is.
Don't.
All right,
That's
so-
another. Wait, that's fine. Don't let ChatGPT write your contracts because if you don't know what's in a contract, there's no way you can check ChatGPT to tell you the right stuff. I have to tell so many people that, and I'm like, did AI write this for you? Because there's run-on sentences here that do not make sense.
That's a whole
That's
different story to get into.
tragic.
Yeah, AI is a different conversation. We'll
Oh,
touch on it next
anyway.
time.
Oh, that's
Yeah, there we
tragic.
go.
Tom Screech 2.0. Coming up.
Yeah, we'll
Talk
do
about
next
it.
one. It's going to be esports and coffee and Tom
Yep.
for the remainder.
So as we wrap up, contracts for esports work, Tom. Do you think they're good? Do you think they're bad? Final thoughts. What do you think?
They're good as long as they are done right and have good parties on both sides. If there's a big evil corporation trying to do a contract with you, read it. Please, God, read it.
I'm gonna give
Beautiful.
a shout out
Awesome.
to Tom really quick. Go follow him on Twitter because that's where
Ah, thank
esports
you.
lives. AJ, take it
Anywhere
away.
else that you want to be followed or?
I could give you guys my address and someone can go throw a
Oh no,
replace
no,
my bin.
no! That's considered doxing, and we're not doing that on Twitch.
No, we're not going to do that.
No.
we're not going to do
Even
that.
if
no.
you were to willingly give it,
I-
that's
Missing a
doxing.
trash can.
I am missing a trash can if anyone wants to.
Oh my
replace
gosh,
my
that's
trash can.
right. You have the lid. Who did?
I drove up my road when I came back, and there was a lid on the floor, and I go, "Did it melt?"
Wait,
No.
how do you know the garbage people didn't take it? What if they're trading them out? Because sometimes you get new garbage.
They could have done.
people.
I don't know who does the garbage in PA, but every time I come back, the bins are just thrown in the road.
Just call the
It's-
city or your landlords. Call your
I might,
landlords.
I might just call them and go, have you guys got a spare bin hanging around? Spherical, 32 liters? Missing a lid?
You may have to call it a garbage can. I don't know if they'll know what a bin is.
Oh, okay, that's fair. I always do that. I was pitching something to my provost the other day, and I was like, and we're going to put a tuck shop here. And he was like, a what? I was like, a tuck shop, like a snack store. He was like, oh.
Oh,
I was like, you don't know what a tuck shop is? He was like,
No.
no. No one does. I made a Princess Diana joke yesterday to my class, and that made no sense.
oh
so
no!
I'm on a roll.
That's out. Like I was still young.
They're
when-
too old now.
Yeah,
Too
that
young,
was-
sorry.
It's no. Who? It's
Oh,
Princess
boy.
Kate. Like everyone was so worried about her and if she was alive or not.
She's reappeared, isn't she?
Well,
Maybe not.
Apparently, people in the UK, London, they don't think it's not on their radar, and it's just a really big thing in America because we love drama. I mean,
Oh, yeah, no.
have
I
you seen
asked my mum.
Vanderpump Rules?
Yeah, I asked my
Calling
mum,
out
and she
Lindsay
was
and
like,
Sarah.
I've not heard
Bennett.
much.
All All right, AJ, take us away.
We like a good mystery, even when it's not ours.
Mhm.
Okay. Why we like all those crime shows? Okay. So, thank you, Tom, so much for kind of walking us through contracts. Follow him on his socials. Maybe a trash can would be good. Would be nice. But thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate your expertise and your kindness. But I think we're all out of coffee. Are we all out of coffee, my
We are.
I
friends?
think I'm Mountain Dew
Nothing
bottle.
left.
Coffee. I have some. But we're all out of coffee. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Take
Thank you
care.
so much.